sword devoured, which is a very key point that Pastor pointed out last week. The woods devoured, right? We started to see God's sovereign hand in many things, and we're going to see it again here. Okay, so verse 9. Then Absalom met the servants of David. Absalom rode on a mule. The mule went under the thick boughs of a great terebinth tree, and his head caught in the terebinth. So he was left hanging there between heaven and earth, and the mule which was under him went on. Now a certain man saw it and told Joab and said, I just saw Absalom hanging in the terebinth tree. So Joab said to the man who told him, You just saw him? And why did you not strike him there to the ground? I would have given you 10 shekels of silver and a belt. But clearly Joab wants revenge here. But what was David's command? Yeah, that's why we have the word but. Start verse 12. But the man said to Joab, Though I were to receive 1,000 shekels of silver in my hand, I would not raise my hand against the king's son. For in our hearing the king commanded you and Abishai and Ittai, saying, Beware lest anyone touch the young man Absalom. Otherwise I would have dealt falsely against my own life. For there is nothing hidden from the king, and you yourself would have set yourself against me. Then Joab said, I cannot linger with you. And he took 3 spears in his hand and thrust them through Absalom's heart while he was still alive in the midst of the terebinth tree. And 10 young men who bore Joab's armor surrounded Absalom and struck and killed him. Now, we pause there for a second. So, again, God's hand, God's sovereignty. We were smiling last week as we ended. We were talking about how God, he's in control of all things. Could we not have even imagined the fact that he actually grew the tree to hang at the perfect height, catch Absalom as he came through with the mule? Yeah. Yeah, yeah. Right, exactly. Right around the throat. Yeah. What's also interesting is that, and I'm going to read a couple of verses here. Proverbs 16:18. We're talking about Absalom, all right? Sort of getting it in the end here. It's 16:18. Pride goes before destruction, and a haughty spirit before a fall. All right, haughty is that word. It's not. We don't use it that much. Maybe we should. Arrogantly proud, self-important, looking down on others. Proverbs 21:4, a haughty look, a proud heart, and the plowing, actually some versions say the lamp of the wicked, or sin. Galatians 6:7, do not be deceived. God is not mocked, for whatever a man sows, that he will also reap. Interesting. We also know that, let me go back to 2 Samuel 14:26, when we got the description of Absalom. And when he cut the hair of his head, all at the end of every year he cut it because it was heavy on him. And he cut it, it weighed the hair of his head at 200 shekels according to the king's standard. So we have this image of Absalom being this, very, good-looking, long flowing hair. It's like, and here it is. Hair has caught him in the tree. How apropos, right? Yeah. Okay. No comments on that? I was going to say, I don't have that concern. I don't think yeah, I go right underneath that. All right. Okay, so Joab goes through revenge, spears. It's interesting that some of the men surrounding Joab also join in on this. Okay. So verse 16. So Joab blew the trumpet, and the people returned from pursuing Israel. Okay. So he blew the trumpet. So he basically called an end to the pursuit. David's army pursuing Israel. Okay, Israel is is where they're currently aligned with Absalom. So, but Joab held back the people, and they took Absalom and cast him into a large pit in the woods and laid a very large heap of stones over him. Then all Israel fled, everyone to his tent. Now Absalom, in his lifetime, had taken and set up a pillar for himself, which is in the king's valley. For he said, I have no son to keep my name in remembrance. He called the pillar after his own name, and to this day it's called Absalom's monument. So again, we get this picture of this very proud, very haughty, he was a son raised up against his father, certainly capitalized on his good looks, and the people rallied behind him. And in the end, God's sovereignty took care of the whole thing. Okay, verse 19. Then Ahimaaz, the son of Zadok, said, Let me run now and take the news to the king, how the Lord has avenged him of his enemies. And Joab said to him, You shall not take the news this day, for you shall take the news another day. But today you shall take no news, because the king's son is dead. What do we think about Joab? I think he's a little concerned at how this is going to be presented to David. Not sure he's worried at this point that, maybe he's worried that everyone will say Joab was the one who actually disobeyed David's order. Don't know. But clearly Joab is not keen on getting this news quickly to David. Then Joab said to the Gushite, Go tell the king what you have seen. So the Gushite bowed himself to Joab and ran. Now, we can read a lot into this, but again, I think from the way I read this, there's this sort of alliance between Joab and the Gushite. So he's thinking, okay, this news is going to be properly handled. Maybe it's going to be presented to David in a way that says, oh, all these men struck him. It wasn't just Joab, who started this. But who knows? I mean, I don't want to read too much into this, but clearly there's this play back and forth that Joab he wants this one to go tell the news, but he doesn't want this one to tell the news. So there's some kind of Joab's got an idea of who should be presenting the proper news. I'll put that in quotes to David. And Ahimaaz, verse 22, the son of Zadok, said again to Joab, But whatever happens, please let me also run after the Gushite. So Joab said, Why will you run, my son, since you have no news ready? In other words, you don't have anything to tell. I just told you, you've got nothing to tell today. But why would you want to be running with the guy that I just told to run and tell the news? But whatever happens, he said, let me run. So Joab, said to him, Run. Then Ahimaaz ran by way of the plain and outran the Gushite. Interesting. So we got two men running to tell the news. Gushite gets a head start, but Ahimaaz, he wants to tell the news, so he starts out running. You have a question? A comment? I know my wife. That troubled little face. It's like, anyway. Yeah, why would somebody really want to give that news? Because, well, like you said, there's good news and bad news. The good news is that they've won the battle. Okay, they've turned Israel back to their tents. Okay, they fled, and now we're going to pursue. Now David's going to be king again. But then again, they violated his order, and they've got to tell David his son is dead. Daniel. Oh yeah. So right, it's a good point. Dennis was saying that that it could be viewed as David possibly killing the person who brings this bad news, and possibly Joab was trying to protect Ahimaaz, saying, "Hey, don't go. We'll send the Gushite." Good thought. Don't know. Pastor, you got it? Gushite from Africa, huh? Yeah. So an outsider. Let me send the outsider with the bad news. Yeah, a slave or a servant. Okay. An Ethiopian. Okay. Yep. Right. Okay. All right. So we get a little insight there. All right. So now the two men are running. So he said to him, "Run," and Ahimaaz ran by the way of the plain and outran the Gushite. I just picture it's so great imagery. See these guys running. Now David was sitting between the two gates, and the watchman went up to the roof over the gate, to the wall, lifted his eyes and looked, and there was a man running alone. Then the watchman cried out and told the king, and the king said, "If he is alone, there is news in his mouth." And he came rapidly and drew near. David's like, okay, news from the war front. Then the watchman saw another man running, and the watchman called to the gatekeeper and said, "There is another man running alone." And the king said, "He also brings news." So the watchman said, "I think the running of the first is like the running of Ahimaaz, the son of Zadok." He must have had a unique gait to his running. I don't know. And the king said, "He's a good man and comes with good news." Yeah, like he knew him, right? Yeah, yeah. So Dave, yeah, Dancer said that this is again just filling in sort of maybe that David knew this person, he knows him. This could be why Joab didn't want to send him with this news. Yes, there you go. Zadok the priest. Very good. You guys are getting really good at this. All right. He's a good man and comes with good news. So Ahimaaz called out and said to the king, "All is well." Then he bowed down with his face to the earth before the king and said, "Blessed be the Lord your God, who has delivered up the men who raised their hand against my lord the king." So, the first thing out of his mouth to David, that, hey, we won. We won the battle. And what is King David's first thought? Is the young man Absalom safe? Ahimaaz answered, "When Joab sent the king's servant and me, your servant, I saw a great tumult, but I did not know what it was about." Smart guy. maybe, maybe he didn't know. I don't know. The king said, "Turn aside and stand here." So he turned aside and stood still. Just then the Cushite came, and the Cushite said, "There is good news, my lord the king. For the Lord has avenged you this day of all those who rose against you." Same news. And the king said to the Cushite, "Is the young man Absalom safe?" So the Cushite answered, "May the enemies of my lord the king and all who rise against you to do harm be like that young man." Yeah, he's dead. No, he paints this picture for David. David knows exactly what this means. 33. Then the king was deeply moved and went up to the chamber over the gate and wept. And as he went, he said thus, "O my son Absalom, my son Absalom, If only I had died in your place, O Absalom, my son, my son. One commentary I wrote was, it's a picture of someone substitutional death. David's desire to be, if only I had died and you could live. Even someone who was his enemy, someone who had gone against him, someone who has turned his back to him, someone who has revolted against him. And it's exactly what Jesus does for all sinners. Put that thought in your head. Okay, we get this imagery throughout the Bible. Sometimes it's good to just pause and think about that, because we have this story going on, and we were like, okay, we're in this story. We've got Absalom. We're all feeling like, okay, he's going to get it and he deserves it, and then we get this imagery of Jesus and on the cross, forgive them, for they know not what they do. Yeah. Father's love for a son, yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. There's a lot of things going on here. You can, yeah, Seth. Yeah, yeah. After the sin of Bathsheba and being confronted with that, you see him. He's in a tailspin, but he also sees all of the consequence of this sin sort of unraveling. All the wives, as Pastor pointed out a couple of weeks ago. You've got a bunch of wives. You got sons from different women, all sort of, lots of friction. David not taking control of his household, not, Absalom, kills his half brother. There's all this stuff going on, and David, pronounces judgment on Absalom, says, I don't want to see you, and then lets him back in, and, there's all these things going on. Yeah, reflecting on what could have been done as a father, right? And feeling almost, partly responsible for Absalom's attitude. Yeah. Okay. We're all thinking, at least I'm thinking about all the things that I've done in my past. And I was like, okay. All right. Yeah, no matter how bad a person is, when they pass, we mourn. We mourn for the loss, especially if we know they're not a believer. All right. Okay. Dun dun dun. No. Chapter 19. And Joab was told, behold, the king is weeping and mourning for Absalom. So the victory that day was turned into mourning for all the people. For the people heard it said that day, the king is grieved for his son. And the people stole back into the city that day, as people who are ashamed steal away when they flee in battle. So here we have this great victory. They've gone out to war. They've been outnumbered. God's hand, they see it because there are men dropping in the woods. There's like this great feeling over this whole thing, and now it's turned completely. And now you can almost, just taking the wind out of their sails, and instead of coming back into, Jerusalem with some vigor about, okay, let's get this turned around again. They're all kind of, hanging their heads. Yeah. So, jumped ahead, sorry. Stole back into, okay, steal away. But the king covered his face, and the king cried out with a loud voice, oh, my son, Absalom. Oh, Absalom, my son, my son. Then Joab came into the house of the king and said, today you have disgraced all your servants who today have saved your life, the lives of your sons and daughters, the lives of your wives, and the lives of your concubines, in that you love your enemies and hate your friends. Giving it to him pretty straight, right? For you have declared today that you regard neither princes nor servants. For today I perceive that if Absalom had lived and all of us had died today, then it would have pleased you. Now therefore arise, go out, speak comfort to your servants, for I swear by the Lord, if you do not go out, not one will stay with you this night. And that will be worse for you than all the evil that has befallen you from your youth until now. Then the king arose and sat in the gate. And they told all the people, saying, There's the king sitting in the gate. So all the people came before the king, for every one of Israel had fled to his tent. So, David takes the advice to heart. Like, maybe you're right. Dennis? Yeah, Joab's an interesting character, right? He's yeah, yeah, yes. Joab's definitely taking this as almost like a personal insult. I mean, here he was. When Absalom came back, let's remember that Absalom took Joab out of having the army, right? So then Joab, it's implied in the verses that Joab then fled to David's side, because the next thing we read is Joab is leading part of the army for David. So there's time that's passed here, but Joab's like he's this political guy. He's got he's definitely he's got his own motivations, and his alliance. He was, as Danith just pointed out, he was the one who actually was going to Absalom, trying to get him to come back. This is. And for what reason? Knowing that Absalom would revolt? Possibly, yeah. Or just, just, I don't know, just trying to be aligned with somebody. Not sure who's gonna take control at this point. But clearly, David's come up on top. Joab is avenged. Joab has done what the surrounding people would do. They killed the opponent. So he says, look. Got to kill Absalom. So he kills him, and now David's now been restored. But David's, now it's like, yeah, but what have you done? We've rallied thousands of people to your side, and now all you can talk about is the death of your son. Yeah, yeah, sure, and then you. Uh, had Joab never seen that kind of sorrow? I mean, he is a man of war, so he understands. But I think personally, I think he's very much in tune with the political landscape, so to speak. How are we going to spin this? And let's make sure we spin it properly. Look, we're bringing back David. We need everybody to come. Look, there's still this conflict. We're going to see there's still this conflict between Judah, David, and Israel. The people don't all of a sudden, because David won, everyone's going to be like, oh, this is great. Let's all just get behind the king. So I think Joab understands the sort of the political landscape. You're going to say something. Yeah, so David has, yeah, God calls him a man after my own heart. So David's heart. So what you're saying is David was in a position where he needed somebody to sort of remind him, but he was also, his heart was malleable enough to be able to change the way he was looking at something. He wasn't prideful. Like, look, I'm in mourning. This is what we're going to do. I'm the king. That kind of thing. No understanding like that. But it was somebody else. No. Oh, that's right. Oh, yeah, that's right. Pastors reminding me. The Absalom had burned Joab's field to get his attention. Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah. So Joab, yeah, said you should have killed him in the tree because then I could deny. I didn't have anything to do with this. Yeah. Yes. Hmm. Uh-huh. So the closest of family, everyone, even though they were at odds, when it comes to like someone's come against the family tends to rally together. Yeah, yeah. Let's not forget that Joab is David's nephew, but not as close, right? Not his son. All right. Who remembers where we are? Okay. Yeah. Verse 9, right. For every one of Israel had fled to his tent. Now all the people were in, verse 9, now all the people were in a dispute throughout all of the tribes of Israel, saying, the king saved us from the hand of our enemies. He delivered us from the hand of the Philistines, and now he has fled from the land because of Absalom. But Absalom, who we anointed over us, has died in battle. Now therefore, why do you say nothing about bringing back the king? So there's this confusion. It's like, hey, we had our line. David was the king. He defeated the Philistines. He was the king. But then Absalom, and we kind of aligned ourselves with Absalom, and now he's dead, and David's back, and you can see this whole political thing going on. Like, how are we gonna resolve this? 11. So King David sent to Zadok and Abiathar, the priests. Zadok the priest. Thank you, Seth. Saying, speak to the elders of Judah, saying, why are you the last to bring the king back to his house, since the words of all Israel have come to the king to his very house? You are my brethren, you are my bone and my flesh. Why then are you the last to bring back the king? So what's David doing? He's sending out news by word of the priests, right? Men who are respected, men who are going to be listened to, and he's saying, why are you the last ones to come? Hey, look, let's put that in the past. I'm back. I'm king. I need you to, fall in behind me here. And say to Amasa, are you not my bone and my flesh? God do so to me, and more also, if you are not commander of the army before me continually in place of Joab. Oh boy. Amasa, who was the commander of whose army? Absalom's, has now been brought back, and David now puts him in charge of the army in place of Joab. Again, you can look at this as a political thing. You know, in our early politics, I think most people will recognize when there were two presidential candidates, the one who lost became the vice president. Wouldn't that be interesting today? No. Yeah. But you see, there's this undertow of political stuff going on here. All right. Yeah. Wait. Wendy says. Yeah. Does David ever find out that Joab was the one who actually killed him? He's kind of. I think he. I'm not sure we have scripture that. Well, that's your homework assignment for next week, my dear. Okay. Yeah. True. Pastor just said that's a tough thing to hide. You got to figure these men of war. There's a lot of people talking. A lot of people have seen this. They, even the ones who brought the news. Everyone's kind of in tune. Everyone's talking. You can't just assume that everyone's in these silos, right? Yeah, I mean, can you imagine? There's yeah, they don't. There's a lot of people that don't hold Joab up like this because Joab, the word gets out that Joab had Absalom killed against David's wishes. So this word spreads fast because, especially when David's he's mourning. Everybody's like, we have a great victory, and now, the king is mourning. Why is he mourning? Well, who killed Absalom? It's like, didn't I mean, these are thousands. We're told, thousands and thousands of men in this army. So the word's got to kind of trickle through. Yeah. And why David would replace Joab, right? So yeah. I mean, it's all. Yeah, it doesn't. Sometimes it's not, just written there, but we can kind of. Yeah, right. David saying all right, amongst the troops, amongst his closest men, find out who killed him. I want to know who killed him. Yes. Yes. Right. Yeah, the whole political thing, right? So because we're presented with this, we got this whole group of this group of Israel, okay? The tribes that are aligned with Absalom, they've lost. David's coming back. David's troubled because these people are like, well, why are you the last ones to get behind me? All right, maybe I'll do something. I'll take one of your key guys, and I'll put him in my cabinet, so to speak. Yeah, I mean, here we are looking at some amazing conflict here. I mean, is it so far from what we what we see? It's some things nothing new under the sun, as God said. Oh yeah, Pastor's pointing out. So within a political party, in our system, we have the primaries deciding who is going to be the presidential candidate. You look at those candidates, a bunch of them end up in key positions after because they're encouraged to drop out because they have a whole bunch of people behind them, but they're not the leader in the polls. So it's like, okay, but if you drop out and these people and you endorse me, you know, I got a spot for you. Yeah. Right. Okay. Continue. All right. So okay. So he swayed the hearts of all men of Judah, just as the heart of one man, so that they sent this word to the king: "Return you and all your servants." And the king returned and came to the Jordan. So David he hasn't come back to Jerusalem yet. And Judah came to Gilgal to go to meet the king, to escort the king across the Jordan. And Shimei, the son of Gera, a Benjamite, who was from Bahurim, hurried and came down with the men of Judah to meet the king. There were 1,000 men of Benjamin with him. And Ziba, the servant of the house of Saul, and his 15 sons and his 20 servants with him. And they went over the Jordan before the king. Then a ferry boat went across to carry over the king's household and to do what he thought good. So everyone's positioning themselves. We've got the Benjamites, right? That's the tribe in which Saul came from. We know that they were not too pleased that David was the king and how that all came about. So but now they're okay. And Ziba, who was in charge of Mephibosheth, learning how to say it. Harry warned me I better learn how to say it because in a couple of weeks I'm going to be I'll be killed at the border. Yeah. Okay. So you got all these people that come in, and it's like, okay, David's back. We better get in his graces here, right? So, second half of verse 18. Now Shimei the son of Gera fell down before the king when he had crossed the Jordan. Sorry. Then he said to the king, "Do not let my lord impute iniquity to me, or remember what wrong your servant did on the day that my lord the king left Jerusalem, and the king should take it to heart." He was the guy throwing rocks. Wasn't too long ago, chasing after him, throwing rocks, cursing at him. David gave, we saw David's hand of mercy there. We're reading ahead. He's going to get his own. Well, again, what's the verse? Whatever a man sows, he reaps. Yeah, we actually, right. We thought he was completely out of his mind. It was like we were actually talking to some people that just do crazy things, right? And here he is. He's saying for sure, "For I, your servant, know that I have sinned. Therefore, here I am. And first to come today of all the house of Joseph to go down to meet my lord the king." Interesting. I read a commentary. Joseph, not on the line. The Benjamites are not in the line of Joseph, but we'll go back to that. But Abishai, the son of Zeruiah, answered and said, "Shall not Shimei be put to death for this, because he cursed the Lord's anointed?" And David said, "What have I to do with you, your sons of Zeruiah, that you should be adversaries to me today? Shall any man be put to death today in Israel? Or do I not know that today I am king over Israel?" Therefore the king said to Shimei, "You shall not die." And the king swore to him. Okay. I think it's 12 minutes after, so I'm going to stop there. We could get into, I think this is a good place to stop. Any other thoughts before we close? Interesting. The story's moving along. It's sort of like, there's a lot of traction here. Yeah. He's worried about his life. Right. He says I'm the sin, I've sinned, but again, we don't know whether he's completely heartbroken or he's just panicked over the fact that it's like somebody wants him dead, and he remembers what he was doing against David. Yeah, Gary. Yeah. Yeah, it's right. When you have, we see it unfold in our current politics. It doesn't unfold with somebody actually, jabbing someone with a spear, but it's a political spear. It's like, and sometimes, someone who is in a position of, hey, look, we had this conversation yesterday. Politicians, a lot of the politicians, this is all they know. To the extent that they get to a point, and then somebody says, and politically they are put to the side. That's their whole career. That's their whole life. That's, very hard to come back from something like that. I mean, especially, you lose an election. It's like, okay, yeah. So it goes on. All right, let's close. Lord, we thank you so much again for your word. We struggle through some of these things, but we also see how nothing's new under the sun, and how all these conflicts, how they unfold even in our day to day. So we ask that you just help us to see what your hand did in all of this. We also ask for direction in our lives so that we can understand better how to serve you and to listen to your commands and your teaching. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.